Hey guys, and good evening. And I did a video earlier talking about this album briefly, kind of showing it off. Of course, this is King Crimson's Lark's Tongues and Aspic. Came out in '73. It was their fifth album. But anyway, I didn't think about it, but I thought I wanted to do more of a kind of an in-depth talk about this album because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this album influenced me a great deal as a music enthusiast, as a music listener, especially as a teenager. It really kind of expanded my mind in terms of what was possible musically and kind of sonically and these things, and kind of led me down the path of music appreciation, and of course, which led me to hi-fi. So here we are today. But anyway, let's talk about it. So the first thing you got to understand about Lark's Tongues and Aspic is, well, related to me personally, obviously. I'm 35, although when I was born in '89, my mom was older. I think she was almost 40 when I came around. And so, she kind of grew up during the, late '60s, early '70s. And so she loved a lot of what we consider classic rock nowadays. She loved Jimi Hendrix. She loved The Who. She loved Led Zeppelin. A big band she loved was April Wine, which I never really did care for. But in any case, she listened to the Byrds, did I say the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, all of them, you name the band, she loved listening to them. And so, we listened to that as a kid as well, because it's what she listened to. Of course, my brother and I, who I grew up with, we listened to other things as well, but, it kind of led me to the path of appreciating that type of music long term. And, I remember coming up to be, a teenager, 12, 13, 14 years old. And I remember it was at the time I really started to really truly appreciate music. And I remember the first band, I really was like, man, these guys are good. Something just clicked in my brain, and that was The Who. It was the album Who's Next, as a matter of fact. And, of course, that led me to Tommy and Quadrophenia and so on and so forth. And, that led me down this kind of rabbit hole as a teenager of, going through The Who's whole catalog and absorbing every album, like start to finish. And then that led me to AC/DC, to Led Zeppelin, to the Rolling Stones, to Creedence Clearwater Revival, to the Grateful Dead, to Three Dog Night, to you name it. And of course, that eventually led to progressive rock, because I got to the point where I felt like, once we get to like John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, we start to kind of get to the roots of rock, which of course is blues. And then like, well, where do we go from here? And of course, that led me to like progressive rock. Well, let's see where that changes. And of course, that led me to bands like the Moody Blues or Yes or Traffic or who else? The German band Can. And of course, King Crimson. And King Crimson's most famous album, more or less, is their first album, which is In the Court of the Crimson King, a fantastic album. If you ask somebody out in the street, who in a record store, who even barely tangentially understands music or has reference of classic rock, and you mention, what King Crimson album comes to mind? Generally, they'll say, oh, the one with the face on it, kind of like the painted face that's kind of screaming a little bit. Well, that's of course their first album, but this was their fifth album. And retrospectively, it's thought of very highly, but I don't think this album did very well when it came out, although I could be mistaken. I do know albums like, during the '90s and 2000s, albums like Red and Lizard, and what's the one with the galaxies on it? I always forget the name of that. The name of that album. But in any case, those albums were thought of a little bit more highly than this. But as a teenager, when I listened to this for the first time, what really stood out to me about Lark's Tongues and Aspic was the fact that it's a menacing album. And it's it is the first piece of music that I ever remember listening to that actually scared me. And still to this day, I feel, particularly the side one, Lark's Tongues and Aspic, part one, of course, Book of Saturday, and Exiles. The whole side one, in my opinion, almost scares me when I listen to it. It fills me with this sort of dread. And I didn't know as a teenager that music could make you feel that way. I always thought, music was supposed to be happy and fun and exciting and all these things. I didn't know music could make you scared or make you feel dread or menacing or anything like that. But this certainly introduced me to that because it is sort of a menacing sounding album. It's almost uncomfortable to listen to the first few times. But the more you listen to it, you kind of appreciate the art of it. Let's put it that way. It's very avant-garde, although avant-garde isn't normally applied to rock music. But that's a good way to put it at. It's very in the way we would describe like someone like Archie Shepp with jazz, and we would describe his music as avant-garde. It's basically taking the basic building blocks of what music is, or what that genre of music is, in the case of Archie Shepp, of course, jazz, but refacing those building blocks to where they become different. And instead of it being A, B, C, D to make a song, it becomes C, B, D, A, or whichever, right? And that's kind of what they did here, largely. And it really introduced me to that concept. And of course, like I said before, it really led me down the path of loving, jazz and Archie Shepp and Ornette Coleman and others, of course, as well. And the absolute brilliance of that, of just the artistry of it, beyond just the aspect of having something to dance to or being able to, rhythm-wise. Let's get more intellectual with it. Let's get more, actual appreciation of the art form of creating music itself and the beauty therein. And then lastly, one last thing. If anybody is curious, and, it's something I looked up as a teenager, and this was early days for the internet, if I recall. And I remember having to, I think I went to the library and looked it up, and I asked one of the library ladies what that means. But if anybody's curious about and I'm just nobody might be curious. Most people would probably know, or I don't know. But anyway, Lark's Tongues and Aspic is basically, you got to kind of understand history a little bit, as well as gastronomy, all right, meaning food culture, right? So in the medieval era, it was common in Europe for wealthy people, the upper classes, the royals, whatever you want to call them, to consume what they considered, interesting foods. They did it sort of as a hobby in a lot of ways. One of those particular genres of foods that they would indulge themselves in is eating bird tongues. It was considered a delicacy. You can find recipes going all the way back to like peacock tongues and dove tongues and all kinds of eating bird tongues. I mean, they're little tiny little things. I don't know how much sustenance you get out of that, but in any case, so hence we have Lark's tongues, and that's that reference. It references food. And then, of course, in Aspic. And I remember when I first listened to that, I'm like, what the hell is Aspic? But Aspic is basically, the best way to describe it in a simple way is it's savory jello. And Aspic is a food that you don't really see too much anymore. Occasionally, you'll find weird recipes where people are putting ham in jello and stuff like that. That would be considered Aspic. But basically, Aspic is flavorless jello that is added vegetables and like broth and seasonings and, of course, meat. And in this case, if you can imagine, Lark's tongues in a jello. That was basically what it is. But anyway, I thought that was funny. Thought I'd share that kind of little history lesson for you guys. But anyway, that is it for tonight. Stay tuned for the iFi Audio Diablo 2 video. That's going to be my next big review. So anyway, peace out and have a good night.